I'm happy to share with you. So I'm just setting up my screen. Hopefully we can see and hear everything. Um, the talk is a little on the long side, but I will try to be expedient. So you probably hear about AI every single day, but I'm focused today on AI and speech technology. So, a lot of what we think of as AI is large language models, machine learning, and natural language processing. These are the things that are marketed as AI, but AI itself is rarely defined. People just say it's the magic of AI, and that's kind of all we can get sometimes. Um, we've been particularly concerned about AI functions that mimic behavior or try to obscure the non human status of AI actors. This is from Emily Bender, who's one of the leading scholars in this area. And her colleagues in 2021, they say that work on synthetic human behavior is a bright line in ethical AI development, where downstream effects need to be understood and modeled in order to block foreseeable harm to society and different social groups. So they're calling it an ethical line here. And I want to say upfront that I'm not against the technology. I'm against technology pretending that it can do sociological things that it cannot do, that it is not designed to do. And all of the functions that I'm going to tell you about today are sort of on the other side of this line as far as I'm concerned. Um, Most uses of AI will deal with written text. So you might be familiar with Google's AI overview, this annoying thing that pops up whenever you Google something now. It's a tip for you. You can get rid of it whenever you search something. Just put minus AI and it will disappear. You might also be familiar with ChatGPT's sort of prompt box. As these systems become faster and more high powered, their ability to use more data improves. So now we're seeing speech AI for things like conversational agents. So my graduate students right now are doing an experiment where they're testing the evaluation of ChatGPT's advanced voice sort of conversational agents. Or speech enhancement and noise cancellation. So, in a video call, actually, right now we're on Zoom, we're experiencing noise cancellation, and that is part of speech AI. And this thing that I'm calling socially prescriptive speech technologies, which I'm going to explain in studies one and two, as well as accent translation, which is what I talk about in study three. So, the main questions for today's talk: do AI based speech technology programs that focus on sociolinguistic variation operate ethically and reliably? Can SPSTs, the socially prescriptive technologies, provide realistic feedback about how speakers sound to others, and can they do so without social bias? And how do accent translation programs function, and can or should they convert a speaker's phonology to another quote unquote standard? So I'm going to tell you about three studies. The first one is gender and racial bias issues in a commercial tone of voice analysis system. This is work with Paul Reed at the University of Alabama. I want to say it's forthcoming in Post One, but actually it came out yesterday. So you can read this paper. I'm going to put it on my website later today. It's been forthcoming until just now. The second one is bias and quality in socially prescriptive speech technology, which is under review. And the third one is joint work with Melissa Bass-Burke at the University of Chicago. It's called Social, Ethical, and Phonetic Issues in Accent Translation AI. So the first study, the one that's just come out in Post One, I need to tell you a little bit about automatic speech recognition in case you're not familiar. All of the evaluative and transformational speech technology that I'm going to discuss for the rest of the talk relies on ASR. And there is robust evidence of degraded performance of ASR systems for non standard varieties of English as well as second language varieties. So basically, these ASR systems do not recognize people that don't sound sort of maximally standard, whatever that is to them. Kenicky et al. 2020 argue that AAE speakers are misrecognized at higher rates than other speakers. They argue that the asymmetry in recognition accuracies arise primarily from a performance gap in the acoustic models, suggesting that the systems are confused by phonological, phonetic, or prosodic characteristics of African American vernacular English rather than the grammatical or lexical characteristics. So, in fact, this misrecognition has to do with segmental phonology and prosody, and it's not about the words, which makes it actually harder for ASR systems to address this kind of misrecognition. Um, these systems also have challenges related to managing dialect diversity and individual speaker factors. This is not a problem for human listeners because they utilize social information to improve their recognition, but the ASRs don't have that kind of socio-pragmatic contextual information to be able to do this. Socially prescriptive speech technologies are systems that are increasingly used to give feedback to users about language and their speech patterns across a variety of domains. These include speech pathology, language learning, employment evaluation, and even social interactions. They have some challenges with respect to machine-based feedback. They can have noisy stimuli. If they're giving you feedback in a real-world situation where there's other people, children, animals, whatever, they struggle. They lack physical and contextual information. They don't know about your previous interaction history with the interlocutor. They also don't necessarily have any awareness of culturally appropriate interaction patterns. So Holliday and Reed, 2022 and now 2025, examine one of the first widely available commercial devices with a feature designed to provide such feedback. It's called the Amazon Halo. It worked from 2020 to 2023 when Amazon discontinued it. So the Amazon Halo promises to help users better understand how they sound to others. This is fraught due to complexity of contextual and interpersonal factors involved in socio-pragmatic interpretation, as well as just the basic issues that ASRs have with processing variation. So this is going to be a video that Amazon put forth as part of their marketing for this device. One thing to know, the Halo is it's like a fitness tracker. So like I have Apple Watch that does some of the same functions. It's like sleep, it tracks your steps, your heart rate, stuff like that. But what is unique about the Halo for our purposes is that it claims to have a tone of voice feature. So this marketing video shows you the tone of voice feature.
Health isn't just physical. Social well-being is important too. Introducing Amazon Halo. Halo lets you analyze the tone of your voice throughout the day, because sometimes we don't sound the way we think we sound. Like, maybe you thought you sounded affectionate, but actually sounded bored. Maybe in the future you can do a better job complimenting her talents. With Halo, you can make sure what people hear with their ears matches what comes from your heart.
So there's a lot of gender happening. And I'm not a gender studies scholar, but basically the situation is that we have our cartoon guy who gave his wife a compliment about her French horn playing that she didn't receive as sufficiently worthy of praise or authentic or whatever. And so the device is promising to let him know, oh, well, we can make you give more convincing compliments to your wife in the future, sort of implicitly. That's what they're saying this device does. So, three questions for this study. How does the Amazon Halo evaluate positivity and energy for different voices? Because these are the main scores that it gives. Does the Halo seem to listen for phonetic correlates of energy and positivity? And do these scores display racial and gender bias? So we recorded 80 participants matched for race and gender, black and white, male and female, each reading three passages aloud. And then we played the recordings back to the same Halo device, resetting the device each time so it didn't learn. Then we got the scores for energy and positivity, which are 0 to 100, as well as the qualitative descriptors that they provide for tone of voice. And then we used Process to extract voice quality measures and examine their effects on their ratings. I'm not talking so much about the voice quality piece today, but it's a little complicated. We can discuss in the questions if you want. And the lasso regression with follow-up t-tests to examine race, gender, and these VQ features and how they interact with these scores. So here are the results for positivity. On the x-axis, you see race. So the black speakers are on the left and the white speakers are on the right. And then on the y-axis, it's positivity. The male speakers are on the left in red and the female speakers are in the right in blue. And we see that the Lasso model shows positivity minorly influenced by gender and race, with white speakers having the largest positive coefficient and women having the largest positive coefficient. But these are really small effect sizes. So the effect size is trivial. It means that speakers all read the same passage, so the probable explanation for the small differences is that Halo is actually not even evaluating tone of voice acoustically. It's really weird that you would get scores that are this similar for 80 different people. So we think it actually has to do with the text that they were given to read. And therefore, the hypothesis is that it's likely a speech to text system with subsequent sentiment analysis. So this is so upsetting because they say that they're doing tone of voice evaluation, but what they're doing is automatic speech recognition to understand the words that the speaker is using. And then they're running it through some kind of coarse sentiment analysis. Are these words positive or are these words negative? And then giving you a score for sentiment. So nothing to do with tone, actually. For energy, we see a little bit more complex picture. We see race and gender effects on Halo's energy scores, and a benefit for white speakers and a penalty for women. So there's an interaction of F0, which is the fundamental frequency, what we recognize as the acoustic correlative pitch, that shows lower F0 for women penalizes them. Black women in this sample have a lower F0 than white women, and therefore they experience a double penalty. T-tests reveal significant differences between energy scores of Black and white speakers, and the Black men in the sample had lower energy scores than white men with a moderate effect size. Black women also had lower energy scores than white women with a moderate effect size. So they're doing something real with respect to energy, but not positivity. This is what we were really surprised about. And this is the last piece that we got to when we were writing this paper, because we found a study by Young et al. That had also looked at the qualitative descriptors that Amazon Halo gives. So in this graph, each quadrant shows the most common descriptors for each gender and race pair, and the descriptors close to the center are equally spread across groups. Closer to the corners, we see more unique descriptors. So in our top left here, we see the descriptors that were disproportionately provided for Black women. In the bottom left, we see white women. In the top right, we see Black men. And then the bottom right, we see white men. And you'll notice there is nothing in the white men quadrant. Irritated is the only adjective is only used for Black men, and that was used 129 times, zero for anybody else. So you see it in the corner here. Condescending was only used for Black women 51 times and zero times for any other group. White women were the only group with utterances that were labeled miserable, afraid, or anxious. That's this kind of corner here. Those were 780, 390, and 591 times, respectively. Never provided those adjectives for any other group. So, white men here in this bottom right quadrant are the only group that doesn't have any unique descriptors, suggesting that they were more broadly represented in the device's training data. So because they are more broadly represented, their voices are not seen as exceptional, whereas everybody else gets these kind of unique qualitative descriptors. And this supports the findings of Young et al., which they were looking specifically at gender. There are concerning relationships between the Halo's ratings for energy and positivity, gender, race, and voice features. In a reading task, the Halo demonstrated no difference in positivity evaluations between speakers, likely indicating use of a speech to text model with subsequent sentiment analysis. For energy, we see that Halo penalizes Black speakers and prefers gender normative voices because it particularly penalizes women with a lower F0. Descriptive adjectives reinforce negative race and gender stereotypes, supporting the findings of Young et al. 2023. And there are some issues with the training data here. So when I asked the Amazon employees about how they got the training data for this, they said a group of employees listened to thousands of samples to provide training data, but they did not disclose any further information. And when I asked, who are these employees? Do you have demographic information about them? Gender, race, where they're from? Is English their first language? I was told specifically that Amazon does not collect data about the demographics of their testers because they don't want to be legally liable for misrepresentation. So they intentionally just ask employees and don't know anything about them so that they can get sort of a like colorblind, gender neutral rating. And this is part of why I think you get this result. We know that LLMs can function as stereotype reproduction machines because of their training data and structure. So if you have, for example, Black women underrepresented in this data, that's where you get this kind of bias. So the demographics of Amazon employees, the design of the writing task, and the training data could have major effects on how Halo performs for different types of speakers. It's only getting more depressing from here, and I'm sorry. The second study is I don't like my conversations being judged by an AI, bias in quality and socially prescriptive speech technologies. This paper is under review. So I told you I would explain what socially prescriptive speech technologies are. Here we go. There's a growing interest in AI everything that is now integrated into video conferencing software programs such as Zoom, which we are on now. But there's little independent research on how these technologies evaluate speakers from different linguistic and social backgrounds. And because these systems use large language models and machine learning, even their designers don't know how they work on the back end. So we're talking about unsupervised machine learning, where people just say, here's an input, I want it to look like this output. give me the output. But it's very difficult for designers to tweak these models given that they're unsupervised learning at this point. All of these systems also rely on automatic speech recognition, which has the aforementioned bias challenges. And I'm going to show you just one example on this slide of SPST. This is the ZRA, which I'll explain later. But this is kind of how these systems work. So if you're in a Zoom call, you have your employee here and the other folks on the call, and she's getting scores called conversation metrics here for engagement, for sentiment, how long she's talking, her longest spiel, filler words, talk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I will check these later, but you already kind of have a sense of the nature of this feedback. Systems like the Zoom Revenue Accelerator, the ZRA, and Read AI can provide feedback in real time. And both of these systems are marketed to corporate clients, especially the ZRA more than Read its cost. ZRA, for my research purposes, costs me about $80 a month. Read AI is closer to $15. This is their marketing. The ZRA uses machine learning algorithms to transform customer interactions into valuable insights for identifying opportunities, assessing risks, and ultimately enabling and improving sales team performance. So that's what they say the mission of this kind of software is. Reed says that Reed makes becoming a better speaker possible by applying AI to your past meetings to give you customized private speaker coaching metrics and recommendations. So you can note the difference there in how they are kind of presented. I want to show you, just so you have a sense of how this technology works. This is a marketing video from Read AI that explains their device or their algorithmic processes here.
Welcome to Read, your all-in-one tool to make your meetings more efficient and effective. During a meeting, Read delivers real-time nudges to improve the quality of the meeting and automatically handles the meeting notes. After the meeting, Read provides a comprehensive summary of the meeting, including action items, key questions, topics, and highlights in written and video form. As you use Read across your meetings, it learns what makes your meetings more effective, makes recommendations to improve your meetings, and enables discovery of trending topics so you can watch your work evolve. To start, here's what to expect when using the Read app in your meeting. First off, a recording dialog might pop up depending on your video conferencing platform. Allowing recording will unlock transcription, summaries, and video playback that you can access after the call in the meeting report. Once you allow recording, Read joins the call just like any other participant. During the call, you'll get access to real-time metrics such as talk time, sentiment, and engagement, all based on both the verbal and visual reactions of the participants. You can also focus on clearer communication by monitoring the rates of filler words used and average talking speed. These metrics are aggregated for everyone on the call and will update every 10 seconds. Lastly, you can jot down notes and access past meeting reports without leaving the app. Need a reminder on the action items from last time?
Okay, so what it means is we're on Zoom right now. I've actually never given this talk on Zoom, so it's kind of a fun modality. If I were using Read AI, I could add Read as a participant to this call. And on the side, I'd be seeing this kind of thing on the right, telling me if I'm talking too much, telling me if I'm talking too fast, or if I'm using too many fillers in real time on this call, which I would hate because it would freak me out. But this is what the promise of the technology is. Zoom Revenue Accelerator does something a little bit different. Let me show you how they market their device.
Your team of sellers is likely using video to do business more than ever. What if you could have better visibility into your sales meetings? Using Zoom Meetings and Zoom Phone, Zoom Revenue Accelerator is a conversation intelligence solution that takes the guesswork out of the sales process. With tools to measure talk time and filler words, Zoom Revenue Accelerator can help you improve seller performance and presentation skills, delight customers, and streamline deal cycles. Its sentiment and engagement scores provide a better understanding of how your calls are actually going. Features like transcription, automate documentation, and next steps to keep deals moving. And Zoom Revenue Accelerator is deeply integrated with CRM and Cal.
Okay, so if you're a sociolinguist, you're like, Kill it with fire. Yes, same. But if we're going to do something a little bit more scientific, you can see the difference in the marketing that the ZRA is really oriented to our corporate clients, especially here at the end with like the integrate with your capital, this kind of stuff. Whereas Read AI is like, no, we're going to coach you into being a better speaker. So the questions are, do these SPST systems display bias in their ratings of speakers from different ethnic, gender, and first language groups? Do the system's evaluations of speech rate, filler use, and non-inclusive language seem to be based on objective, repeatable criteria? And what does it mean for linguists and the public as these technologies become more ubiquitous? So I want to explain to you how these systems work and what criteria they are evaluating for content. So we sort of compare these here. Immediately, you can see that Read AI gives a lot more scores than the DRA. Both systems give you scores 0 to 100 for engagement and sentiment, which is exactly what the Amazon Halo did. They also give you score for questions asked and good questions. Read AI gives you a score of sort of the goodness of the meeting. Additionally, clarity, conciseness, and bias, which they seem to define as like how much you're addressing the comments of one person on the call versus another person on the call. But the companies provide little information about how these scores are calculated, how speakers can improve them, or how management, in the case of ZRA, should consider the scores. Because Read AI, you, the speaker, you see the scores. In ZRA, only your manager sees the scores. So you might not even know that it's being used on a call that you're on. From Zoom, this is how they give some guidance for sentiment. Sentiment provides sales reps and managers with a way of assessing the customer's sentiment. This is based on the entire meeting's analysis and mainly focuses on the sentiment of the conversations, with higher scores indicating a more positive effect and scores around 50 indicating a neutral sentiment. Note that in the definition of sentiment, they've used the word sentiment 3 times. I'm still not sure what they mean by sentiment, just that they say that scores around 50 are neutral, that's all. For engagement, they say it's based on various factors, including talk time ratio, response time lag, and frequency of speaker changes. These are used to estimate how engaged a customer or prospect is throughout the entirety of the conversation. So we don't know exactly what factors they're evaluating, but they are looking at how much you're talking and the other person's talking, how the lag in response time, which of course is can be interfered with by something like the internet connection, and how often the speaker changes, which again is kind of a problem because right now in this conversation, I'm talking because I'm giving a lecture. There's 0% frequency of speaker changes. So if it's evaluating me on engagement, it's going to give me a low score because this is a lecture, right? So you kind of see how this could go astray based on the particular type of conversation. There's another set of criteria that these systems use, kind of more stylistic. So again, we have Read AI in the top and ZRA in the bottom. They both give scores for filler words or hedges, talk speed or pace, percentage of talk time or spiel. ZRA gives a score for patience, which is the pause between turns. Read AI gives you scores for charisma and interruptions, which they don't define either. These metrics are not defined. Users are not provided with feedback on why or how they could change scores for these. This is what Zoom says about fillers. This shows the average number of filler words used per minute by the speaker. Filler words such as and hum can indicate that the sales rep needs to be more familiar and confident with what they're saying. Interestingly, studies found that using filler words excessively, as well as not using any filler words, can diminish a speaker's credibility. Managers can locate these user sales reps who use too many filler words and work to improve their conversational or product confidence. There is no citation provided for this. When you click on the hyperlink attached to filler words, it takes you to the Wikipedia article for fillers. And when they make this claim, studies found that using filler words excessively, as well as not using any, there's no research linked. And the psycholinguistic and sociolinguistic research actually doesn't really show this, right? There are pragmatic uses of filler words, but they seem to have this prescriptive idea. This is why I call these socially prescriptive speech technologies, that there is some perfect number of fillers that indicates that a speaker is confident and, sort of good in the situation. So this is the one size fits all model that I am going to argue is a little bit problematic. I did a lab experiment with 88 ethnically and gender diverse students in Southern California when I was at Pomona College. I recorded them in a sound booth in 2 different Zoom calls with me. There was a mini sociolinguistic interview about their backgrounds and their opinions about video conferencing. That's the data I'm presenting. And I ran linear mixed effects regression models for engagement by gender, race, and L1 with a random effective speaker, similar models for sentiment, filler use, and speech rate. These are the results for sentiment. So on the left, we have the Zoom Revenue Accelerator. On the right, we have Read AI. And these on the x-axis is participant race, and on the y-axis is their score for sentiment. And you can immediately see here in the green that the Black speakers are downgraded. So it downgrades scores for Black participants. When we look at interaction effects, we see lower scores for Latino men and first language English speakers. But look at the estimate here. So Black speakers are downgraded about 11 points from the baseline. Latino men are downgraded about 10 points, and the L1 English speakers are downgraded 2.73 points. Read AI does a little bit better, but it still downgrades scores for Black participants by about 8 points and upgrades L1 English speakers. So the directionality of the preference for whether people are speaking English as a first language is in the opposite direction. I think this has to do with the interference of other scores. So the L1 English speakers use more fillers and they also talk faster. So this might explain this, that the ZRA is sort of differentially sensitive to that than Read AI. For engagement, we see a similar pattern. So this time the Black speakers are in blue. The ZRA downgrades the scores for the Asian participants here in green and the Black participants by a greater margin for whatever they are counting as engagement. Read AI only downgrades our Black participants here in blue. For fillers, the ZRA scores fillers per minute, which they call FPM, of speech, while Read AI scores percentage of total words that are recognized as fillers. So this is a little bit different metric, but they're both counting fillers. Users are provided with negative feedback if they use a number or rate of fillers above the system's ideal, though they never specify this rate. So it's not as though the systems are saying, okay, well, you should use 10 fillers per minute or something. There's no like magic number provided, so there's nothing for the speaker to target. In this sample, the filler scores for the ZRA range widely from 5.4 to 20.48 FPM. The ZRA also provides comment on fillers, rating them as high, neutral, or low. The ZRA rated 87 of 88 participants as using a high rate, regardless of their actual FPM. So this means you can use 5 fillers every minute, or you can use 20, but Zoom says that's too many. 5 is really not a lot. 20, maybe it's a lot, but it still might be conversationally appropriate, but it doesn't matter. Any number between 5 and 20 is a problem for them. So there is evidence that they sort of think that the ideal number is 0, despite the fact that their marketing material says that using too many and too few is a problem. They're just penalizing speakers for too many. The ZRA does a little bit better on this. Also, there were no group level differences obtained because everybody is basically at ceiling. Read AI gives a green or orange check mark in its coaching report, with orange indicating too many fillers. The participants who received a reading of more than 3% of their total words being fillers, so 17% of the sample here received an orange check mark. This is maybe a little bit more psycholinguistically realistic, although whether 3% fillers is ideal or not is really also domain specific and speaker specific. So they're using a more sort of reliable metric. Whether or not it's realistic or appropriate, still TBD. And also no group level differences by filler use for read. For speech rate, both systems measure words per minute and provide comments on the scores. VRA's comments for speed are good, caution, and fast, while Read AI's for pace are good, bad, fast, and slow. The ZRA rated 78.4% of the participants as speaking too fast. There's substantial overlap in the scores, however, indicating that the feedback comments are not directly based on words per minute, though ZRA does not list other contributing factors. So they specifically say that it's words per minute. But if you look over here in the orange graph on the top, you will notice if your score is 161, WPM, it could be fast, it could be caution, or it could be good, because 161 is a number that's within all of those ranges. Our fast range is 153 to 227, but our good range is 134 to 192. That is a large overlap. So if they're not counting direct words per minute, it's not clear what else they're counting to establish that the speech rate is too fast. For Read AI, we see a WPM score with comments on pace. The scores range from 109 to 195, but note this is a different range than the ZRA, even though the speech was identical. So words per minute, unlike some of these other metrics, should have an actual ground truth that we can attach to, right? How many words did you say per minute? There's no reason that the range for ZRA should be 153 to 200 something, while it's different for Read AI if they're just counting words per minute. This doesn't change. So there's something different in the algorithm, even though they say that they're counting the same thing. As with the ZRA, you also see category overlap, indicating comments are not directly based on WPM. Even though Read AI specifically defines pace as average rate of speech measured in words per minute. And you see less category overlap here in the purple, but it's still there. Read AI also has one more really interesting function that the ZRA doesn't have, which is that it measures non-inclusive terms. It defines these as usage of words that are potentially offensive or harmful. And the documentation does not provide a list of such words, nor does it provide examples. You'll notice a sort of qualitative difference in the marketing of the ZRA versus Read AI. Not just that Read AI is for individual clients as opposed to corporate clients, but because it gives more scores, it's a little bit more sort of I don't know what to say, but woke in its marketing. It wants you to use terms that are inclusive, and VRA is not concerned with this. But there's a little bit of a problem here. All but one of the terms that the system flagged, so 90% of these, 92% of these terms, were related to neurodivergent characteristics, and all were uttered in the course of participants describing themselves. So I have students in a lab, they're not going to use profanity, they're not going to use slurs, right? Obviously. But in this sample, they were still flagged for talking about neurodivergence. 16 of 88 participants responded yes to the question, do you consider yourself neurodivergent? And if so, how? With answers related to OCD, ASC, and ADHD. Read AI flagged all of these as non inclusive. So if you were talking to me and you said, yeah, I have ADHD, it punished you because you said you have ADHD, because the trigger is you said ADHD. The only other term that Read AI flagged as non-inclusive was a second person plural pronoun usage of you guys, which varies widely by age, gender, and region, as well as perceived offensiveness. So if you're on a call with 10 people who you know are men and you say you guys, then it's totally unproblematic for everybody in this country. If you, like me, are from Central Ohio and you guys is your second person plural pronoun by default, and you're talking to other people from that place, it may or may not be offensive. There are some situations in which, yes, this term is offensive. But again, this is the course one size fits all model to say this is offensive, this is not offensive, sort of devoid of context. With respect to evaluating filler, speech rate, and non inclusive terms, these systems provide feedback removed from pragmatic and sociolinguistic context. Human listeners, use both speaker and context specific information when evaluating speech quality across parameters. And as a result, the SPST systems that do not account for social, interactional, and contextual information cannot provide realistic feedback. This is especially true for subjective evaluations of characteristics like fillers, talking pace, or potential offensiveness of terms, especially as used by speakers from a variety of social linguistic backgrounds. Big picture, LLMs are biased. Socially prescriptive speech technologies are biased. So, like the other LLMs, which demonstrate pervasive gender and racial biases, like in study one, video conferenced SPST systems, they systematically downgrade speakers from marginalized groups, and they provide coarse one size fits all feedback regarding fillers, speech rate, and non inclusive terms. And they do so without any explanation as to how the systems work. So even if your goal as a speaker is to get the highest score that the ZRA can give you, it won't tell you how to do that because it's not telling you what's counting as fillers or what the right number should be. Socially prescriptive speech technologies do not provide realistic human like feedback to speakers about style. The Amazon Halo shows bias and inconsistencies in positivity, energy, and its qualitative feedback. The ZRA and Read AI classified 99% of speakers as deficient in at least one variable. Note that these are students at a prestigious college, right? Who are used to using the standard language, who are used to using academic language. And so it's punishing them. It's definitely doing worse things for people that don't have that level of education. These systems provide no actionable suggestions about how speakers can improve these metrics, which remain largely undefined. They also lack contextual information about the speaker listener relationship, making their judgments about how you sound to others, which is the explicit promise of the Amazon Halo, unreliable. All three systems show evidence of systematic gender, racial, and L1 bias, with significant potential to lead to discrimination against our already marginalized speakers and groups. The last thing, the last study. This is social phonetic and ethical issues in accent translation AI. Startups including CRISP and Sanas propose solutions to the problem of accent diversity. Major companies, including Apple and Google, are also reportedly working on similar programs. Both of these companies began with noise cancellation and audio enhancement services, but have now expanded to accent translation. CRISP says that accent localization enhances communication for customers and call centers by softening accents while preserving the speaker's voice for authenticity and personal connection in every interaction. Thanos says that our technology doesn't just modify your speech, it transforms it. Powered by a cutting edge architecture, Sanos intelligently generates speech to deliver utmost clarity and articulation. What is clarity and articulation? No clue, they don't say. Right. I want to show you exactly how you would encounter this technology if you, for example, operated a call center in India, because that is the target um, audience for CRISP, which is based in Berkeley. So I'm going to show you their demo for how this technology works.
Hello, my name is Mandovi and I'm a call center agent from India. Clear communication is vital for my customers and me, but accent barriers can sometimes make it challenging. That's where crisp accent localization comes in. Let me show you the voice preservation mode in action.
This mode keeps my original voice intact while softening the challenging parts of my accent. It helps customers understand me better, improving satisfaction on both sides of the call.
I turned it off now, so you can hear the difference clearly. I'll now turn it on again.
Notice how my natural tone and personality shine through? This mode allows me to stay authentic, making every interaction more personal and effective. And for the cases where a fully accent localized result is needed, CRISP offers the voice profiles mode. Let me switch to it. With this mode, my accent localizes to a US English accent in real time. Multiple preset voice options are available. Let's check a few out. How do you like this voice? I can even switch to a male voice if needed.
Accent localization eliminates the need for the customers to ask, "Could you repeat that?" and enhances the experience for the customer and also for me.
I've given this talk a few times, and usually this is the place where the audience's faces get like really uncomfy. I assume that your faces are very unhappy. So here is how CRISP is marketing this technology. And you'll notice that it's kind of focused on the financial benefit. So they say that use of this technology results in a 17.1% increase in gross revenue, that it results in improved agent performance, et cetera, et cetera. And I love this part, a broadened hiring pool, and they specifically say support DE&I by removing language barriers and unlocking global talent. And Sanas, the other company that does this, says the same thing. On top of their page, they say empower global talent. Here on the left, by embracing diverse accents, we build a global talent pool and expedite onboarding, maximizing retention and immediate impact. So embracing diverse accents means let's make these people sound American, or whatever our target of American is. Yeah, I know it's a lot. Why do companies want accent translation? Three things. There's an assumption that speakers with different phonologies genuinely experience communication difficulties. This may or may not be true. Beliefs that customers will be less satisfied if they experience accent diversity due to their racist and xenophobic beliefs. That is true. And a desire to obscure the outsourcing of labor to countries such as India and the Philippines. The programs claim to convert accents of call center employees to one imagined as neutral or intelligible. But Rahman in 2009 observes that desirable accents in call center settings overwhelmingly are those with general American English phonology. Again, this is like an idealized standard. Um, Call center employees outside the United States have long been required to undergo extensive Americanizing of their voices. Karp says that workers must first complete a spell of accent training or so-called accent neutralization, translation, localization. Although there's nothing neutral about the accents that the workers are trained to use, excellence in Indian call centers is now almost synonymous with anglicizing the voice. Scholars in business and industrial relations have labeled this kind of thing national identity management, in which employees are asked to subsume different national identities as part of their job. So this has existed a long time before there was this kind of technology. We know that listeners are proficient at understanding speakers with accents different from their own and that they adapt rapidly to new talkers. So, accent translation technologies are supposed to solve the social problems related to intolerance for variation and the responsibility of the communicative burden. Lippy Green defines the communicative burden, saying that the burden of communication is shared on every level by both participants. If one accepts that good communication skills are necessary for job X without further definition of those skills, one must still question the employer's claim that accent Y impedes communication. In fact, it is not necessarily the accent which is the problem, but negative subjective evaluation on the part of the listener. Linguistic stereotyping research also reveals bias against ethnic groups itself that contributes to perceived intelligibility changes. So, when people expect that they will have trouble understanding a speaker, they do have trouble understanding a speaker. And this is robust in the literature. Accent translation programs also relocate responsibility for effective interaction from the customer onto the employee, positioning the employee's non-American identity and natural phonology as problems to be overcome by technology. So Melissa Burke and I wanted to ask, do accent translation programs work to convert the speech to a US native phonology, at least with respect to vowels? We downloaded the publicly available demos from Sonos and Crisp. They will not let us play with this technology. We can only use what they put out for the public. And then in Pra, we examined waveforms and spectrograms and plotted the vowels from the original and translated samples. We also looked at vowel duration differences. So on the left, we have the original speech. On the right, we have the translated speech. And we see already the formants in the modified version here of the spectrogram are artificially connected, even in stretches of speech without voicing or format structure here on the right. So you see four clean formants over here. Here, maybe two, maybe four, maybe five, but they are not neat. No particular this section where there is a dropout because they're using a voiceless segment. Over here, you see the dropout in the waveform. The formants are still connecting that. So it means that they're trying to make things that are actually voiceless sound more voiced. For all speakers, we use the Montreal Forced Aligner to extract word and segment level measurements. And then in Prot, we extracted duration F1 and F2 from the vowels and hand checked instances of formants more than two standard deviations from the category mean from a speaker. Here's the speaker's vowel space overall in the unmodified version here on the right in the purple. And then here's a modified version in the green. And so like you see a really big difference in the vowel space. In fact, there's overlap between the F2 of what sounds like E for them in their natural speech and what sounds like OO for them in the modified speech. So it's kind of a category overlap problem. We also see issues with respect to duration. So we see the unmodified on the left in the dark gray and the modified in the light gray. Overall, the duration is systematically shortened from the original to the modified speech. Vowel duration is more variable in unmodified than modified version, suggesting that overall target to homogenize durations across and within types. This might be supposed to mimic AAE stress time, where alternating syllables differ in duration. Indian English is allegedly more syllable timed, and so they're kind of trying to give this impression that it is more stress timed, more like American English. But when humans produce more stress time patterns, they usually change the ratio of stress to unstressed vowels, not only the duration. So it's doing something, again, very coarse. We see a wholesale shift and expansion of the vowel space that does not necessarily make the output acoustically more similar to naturally produced American English. Performance smoothing technique likely creates a domino effect of changes, resulting in improbable acoustic features for other segments, especially the diphthongs, which we didn't look at here, but they are applying this sort of one size fits all transformation. So the diphthong glide seems to be doing something weird. There's also the issue of voiceless obstruents sounding more voiced because of this transformation of the format structure and the systematic lowering and fronting of most vowels and shortening of vowel durations without context or vowel identity, which shouldn't necessarily make the speech sound more American. For humans, phoneticians and dialect coaches would probably suggest a more targeted approach, handling different vowels in different ways, but this is technically challenging to undertake in real time, which is why you see them use sort of this course model. These programs decompose and recompose syllables and segments, but the output does not resemble natural speech. And this is the hallmark of many AI transformations. This is an uncanny valley effect. We see issues with consonants and suprasegmentals beyond the scope of this study. I'm concerned because prosodic transformations may be more crucial for intelligibility than segmental ones, and different varieties of English have different context-dependent prosodic realization patterns that may be interactional here. It's also impossible to know if the observed output parameters are truly a result of accent translation or if they're related to the noise cancellation algorithms. These companies started out doing noise cancellation and then moved to accent translation after the fact. And there's no way to do accent translation without noise cancellation or vice versa. So if you're really skeptical, you might say, okay, they say that there is improved customer satisfaction, but maybe it's not the accent translation. Maybe it's just the noise cancellation. We don't know. Um, there's a little bit more here that I'm going to speed through. But basically, the desire for these technologies are rooted in standard language ideology, but public awareness of this is low. And people believe that AI can fix their speech. In the second study, I asked the students, would you ever use a program like this? And they said, oh, maybe to practice for a talk. I've been told I use too many fillers or I talk too fast. These systems are preying on linguistic insecurity and allowing the companies to exploit that for profit. In particular, the ZRA says that scoring is provided for informational purposes and may contain inaccuracies. Results are not intended to be used for employment decisions or other decisions. But in the marketing webinar, we see them rank employees, and they say specifically that maybe you need to instill more confidence in your employees if they're using too many fillers. So the legal disclaimer here is very different than the use cases that they market. We also don't know if these accent translation programs do anything beyond noise cancellation. Human-like evaluation is a fundamental challenge for both SPSTs and accent translation systems because they focus only on the speaker without the listener. Human listeners can contextualize speech using their sociolinguistic competence in a way that influences their evaluations. For example, idealized pause length is culturally variable and listener specific. Fillers have a wide range of uses, including discourse structure, self repair, and floor holding, and accommodation to speech rate results in higher interactional efficacy. So, a one size fits all model that says that this is how many fillers you should use or how many speech, what your speech rate should be, is not cognitively real for humans. So, the enterprise of helping speakers understand how they sound to others has to consider who the others are, but we only have course prescriptive standards here. Um, these systems are increasingly used to provide feedback to humans about how they sound to other humans, but these functions cross an ethical boundary that concerns researchers. So we see these being used all over the place. There's a potential for them to be harmful to already marginalized speakers and groups and for them to reproduce bias. So this is my last slide. We need more public education about how speech technology works as well as its limitations. This is not magic. It is probability. It cannot fix your speech, and there's nothing wrong with your speech to begin with. Focusing only on the listener side of the equation also doesn't help you understand how you sound to different individuals. We need trainings about ethics and the potential harms of SPSTs in accent translation and linguistics and industry, and increased consumer awareness of these technologies. It's not clear that employees or customers would opt in if they knew that these were being used against them. We also need policy and legal reform that deals with these programs, particularly employment contexts. Lippy Green discusses accent discrimination as illegal if it violates the national origin clause of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So how do we stop people from using this? I think it's only with this legal threat. But companies are not incentivized to address this issue, so the change has to come from the public. These folks are my collaborators and people that gave feedback on earlier versions of this talk. Here is me. You can find me on Blue Sky and TikTok where I post about similar issues. And here's my secret slide because it's a crowd favorite. Thank you.